Again, a hearty Shabbat Shalom. And as we think about what we just read, and we read about, I kind of think about the Haftarah today, which was significant, taken from Ezekiel. And I always love to point out, so oftentimes people get prophecy confused with what really should be identified as typology. If you've heard me preach or talk or teach before, this should be kind of like a autopilot thing. You know that I'm going to refer to typology. It's important. There's a significant typology in the prophecy of reference to what we see, and it is a prophecy, in fact, in Ezekiel that we just read about, but about the two sticks, this illustration of the two sticks becoming one. And of course, this is an allusion to what is going to happen with the northern tribes. And we know that the northern tribes are separated from Judah and Benjamin, and there's this rift division. Interestingly, Israelite religion became associated with one tribe, and that is the tribe of Judah, right? Because you're Jewish if you can trace your ancestry back to that. And now it doesn't matter whatever tribe it is, it goes back to that. But there's this separation within Judah and Benjamin, and then of course the 10 northern tribes. And we see that coming back together and becoming Yahdav, becoming one. We see restoration, just as Joseph was restored to his brothers. And then of course, if you think about it, Joseph's sons, what is significant about his sons? Ephraim and Manasseh. They have a Gentile mother, right? They have a Gentile mother. So what's kind of significant with that? If we think of Joseph, right, being the representation of that in this reconciliation, we see this idea of Gentiles being reconciled with the nation of Israel. And of course, Yeshua prophesies this. He says, I have one flock and I have other sheep that are not of this fold. He says this in John 10. And there will be one shepherd and there will be one flock. And of course, this is alluding back to Ezekiel 38, which is the chapter ahead of where we read. So I love the typologies that we see, that it points us to, and it's laying the foundation for us to have the fullness of an understanding of the Besorah, the good news of Yeshua. So that's kind of my takeaway from the Torah portion in a nutshell. I would like to begin by reading something. You don't have to turn there with me. I've got some passages today. Just want to begin with this passage from Jeremiah. And so might catch some criticism from some people on this, but this week on the Christian calendar, tomorrow for many will be associated with, or on Monday. What's Monday? Does anybody know church history or like high church practice? It's the 12th day, right? So I guess like for people within the church that are celebrating like high churches, today would be like the 10th day, and of course Monday would be considered Epiphany, which kind of concludes the 12 days of Christmas. And then of course there's a passage that they go back to and read to, in this idea of the baptism of Yeshua. And I want us to think about that this week, and it's really not anything to do with the church calendar. That's not why I'm doing it. It has more to do with what I've been doing. We've been in this limbo period between we completed the book of Acts, and then we're going to be starting, not next week, but the following week, we're going to be beginning a series in the book of Galatians. All right, so if you're Messianic, you got to come to that. You want to be here for all of that, because that's like Galatians. It's one of the big linchpins in Messianic Jewish thought and practice, right? It's this, everybody kind of stumbles on the book of Galatians, right? It's this big trouble spot for many, and in fact, the sad thing that we see is that many people in the Messianic Jewish movement, if they can't reconcile certain things, if they can't reconcile Paul's writings, particularly in the book of Galatians as the starting point, sometimes this is like a turning away point for them, and they say, you know what, at the end of the day, it's just not reconcilable. We can't reconcile what we see in Paul's writings and what we see with the rest of the apostles and what develops with the church, and we can't reconcile that with the Torah. And the Torah is the truth, so therefore, maybe this whole gospel thing is really not. And so I think it's important that we have a healthy foundations and understanding, of the Torah, and understanding it in its own context. Because how did, we have to ask the question, and of course a lot of times we go back to Yeshua's words in Matthew chapter 5. And he says, not one jot or tittle of the Torah will pass away until everything comes about, right? And that's the pretext oftentimes. If you've been to a Messianic Jewish synagogue for a while, you've heard that preached once, twice, three, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. I don't know how many times you might have heard it, but it's a big passage in the Messianic Jewish movement, right? And the question oftentimes is, how do we reconcile what Yeshua says there with some of the hard, difficult things of what some of the other apostles, or particularly the Apostle Paul, has to say?